Today's daf Gittin daf chaf test Gittin 29. Today's daf yomi. The Mishnah. We'll start in the Mishnah on the middle of 29a. Hamaybe get Eretz Yisrael. This Mishnah has to be read in conjunction with the Mishnah on Amabez, where it's going to be the person who brings the get from outside of Israel. But here we're talking about an agent that for somebody who's bringing the get within the land of Israel. So he doesn't need to recite B'fanei nechtav, B'fanei nechtav. And this person got sick. It's meaning to say that the agent himself is unable to deliver the get. So he can send it into another agent. This is the sugya in the Gemara of whether or not one agent can make another agent. So he's allowed to appoint another agent in a situation where he's sick. And if the husband says to the agent, when you go to my wife, bring back for me this object, meaning I have a deposit with her, they cannot send that deposit in the hands of somebody else. Meaning to say that he doesn't want his deposit to be in somebody else's possession. So to do the get, you can appoint an agent, and the agent can appoint another agent. But to collect a deposit, then the agent cannot appoint another agent. So Amar Rav Kahana, Rav Kahana says first and foremost, Cholatanan, that what we're talking about is when can an agent appoint another agent? Only in a circumstance where he got sick, where the first agent got sick, meaning there were extenuating circumstances, but not without that. So the Gemara says, Tanam, Pshita, Chol Katani. It says, that's what it says in the Mishnah, he got sick. So the Gemara says, no, Ma'od Tema, he might have said, that even though he didn't get sick, he could still appoint another agent. He might have said, even though he didn't get sick. The only reason why he mentions if he got sick is Orcha de Milsa Katani. It's just speaking in the normal manner. Kamash Malan, we don't say that. We say only where he got sick can he appoint another agent. So the Gemara says, what's a circumstance that our Mishnah is referring to? If he says, take this get and bring it to, make sure this get gets to my wife, then even if he didn't get sick, he could appoint another agent. And if he would say, you specifically have to be the one to bring it, then even if he got sick, he also wouldn't be able to do it because it specified you specifically. The Rashbag, and if this is the approach of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, then Rabbi Shimon Gamliel would say, even if he got sick and he said just Holech, he still wouldn't be acceptable. Because why? We learn these three positions in a brisa. Tanya, Holech gets el ishti. If a man and a husband says to an agent, bring this get to my wife, the agent can appoint another agent. If he says, you specifically take this get to my wife, then it has to be the agent specifically. Rashbag says, so Rashbag says, either way, the agent cannot appoint another agent, meaning even if he got sick. So we want to understand who is the scenario, what's the scenario, who is our Mishnah like? Just pause for a second, that Rashbag says, either way, you can't appoint, and one agent can't appoint another agent. But this is different than the case of betrothal, where we say you can. So that's generally speaking something to be aware of, as Tosfos points out. So the Gemara says, Ibayis Ema, so what's the scenario in which our Mishnah is talking about? Is where the husband says, Holech, where he says to the husband, to the agent, bring the get. And when can he appoint another agent? Only where he got sick. Or Ibayis Ema, Atolech, or if he says, you specifically have to bring it, so it's limited to the agent. But if he gets sick, then there's dispensation because of the extenuating circumstances to appoint an agent. And the third approach is Ibaisem, you could say our Mishnah is Rashbagi, and even though Rashbag says that in general you can't appoint another agent, an agent can't appoint another agent, Chalashani. In the case where he got sick, that case is different. Rashbag would say you can. So now the Gemara says, Tanang, we're going to raise a question. Our Mishnah said, maybe get buried. If you get sick in the land of Israel, if you're the agent, you can appoint another agent. But we have another Mishnah coming up on Samach Vav Amad Aleph, which contradicts this. The Mishnah says, a person says to two people, to new gel ishti, I want you to give this get to my wife. A person says to two people, give this get to my wife, but he didn't give them the get. He made them witnesses. And even though he did, it's how Rashi is explaining it here, and even though he didn't say to them, you yourselves should write it, then we're telling them that they're supposed to write it and give it. And they're not supposed to say to a scribe to give it. So he says to two people, give a get to my wife. And he really means write it and give it. Or if he says to three people, or shosha kisvu get, the tenula ishti, or if he says to three people, write a get and give it to my wife, all these cases, the people can write it and give it, which implies, says the Gemara, they can do it, but an agent cannot do it. Whereas in our Mishnah, it says that you can appoint another agent. That an agent can appoint another agent, whereas the Mishnah in Samach Vav seems to say the agent itself cannot appoint another agent. Amar Abaye, so Abaye explains the difference between the two Mishnayos. Some time am I? What's the reason there why the husband is asking the three or the two to write a get? Mishum de bizayon de baal. What's the reason? The reason why they can't ask anybody else is because really the husband's supposed to know how to write the get himself. He doesn't want other people, he doesn't want the word to spread around that they don't know how to write it, that he doesn't know how to write a get. It's embarrassing not to know how to write. But here in this case, but here the husband doesn't care. That's not the reason why he's asking. He's asking them to bring the get because he's far away. And Rava says, Mishum de Milin. Rava gives a different answer. Rava says, no, what's going on here is Mile. What's Mile? Rava says that in the case of our Mishnah, he gave an actual get. So it wasn't just words. But in the case of the Mishnah in Samach Vav, he just told them what to do. Words, the agent can't hand over to another agent. So it's not enough. It's a technical reason that words can't be handed over. So my benaya, what's the difference between the two approaches? Ika benayu, shliach matana. The distinction between them is if you have an agent for a gift. If you ask these people and to write a shtar matana, so to write a document that you're going to give a gift, you put it to Rav Shmuel. And this is a dispute between Rav and Shmuel. Rav says matana eina get. Rav says that the matana, that the gift is not like the get, and Shmuel says the matana harei get. And Shmuel says that the gift is indeed like a get. What does that mean? So it means as follows. Let's look at Rashi, that the person who's giving the gift said in front of two witnesses, write this document of a gift to such and such a person. So if the reason for the get is like bizayon de baal, if it's like Abaye who says it's because the husband doesn't want to be embarrassed, so therefore the agents can't ask another agent. Well, in this case, it's not the husband's responsibility to write the get, to write the gift contract. So therefore he won't care and you can appoint another agent. But if the reason is because here also that the words were not, you can't appoint another agent unless there's something tangible. Here too, it's just words, and so the agent wouldn't be able to appoint another agent. So Rav is saying, and it's also dispute whether or not we view the laws of shtar matana like the laws of shtar get, and that's a dispute between Rav and Shmuel. So now the Gemara continues that if the husband had said to his agent, get for me a my deposit back, then he can't give it to somebody else. He can't appoint another agent for that. Amar Reish Lakish, Kan Shana Rabbi. So when Rabbi taught this Mishnah, he said, Eina Shol R'shayla Hashil. If somebody borrows, cannot lend it to somebody else. Eina Socha R'shayla Haskir. And somebody rents it, cannot rent it out to somebody else. So when Rabbi Yochanan heard his Chavrusa Reish Lakish say this, Amar Lo Rabbi Yochanan, Zeu Afilu Tinoko Shal Beis Rabban Yodim. He says, that's so obvious. This is something that even the Tinoko Shal Beis Rabban Yodim, even the school children know this. So the Gemara says this means Zimnin the Gita. So what's he saying? What it's saying is that you have to read it in connection with the previous line. Zimnin the Gita Nami Lo Have. That if he deviates with respect to how he handles the deposit, sometimes it will disqualify the entire get. The Nasta Kamisha Amaro, it's as though he's saying, Al Tigrasha, it's as though he said to the agent, Al Tigrasha Al Babayis. He's saying, divorce her in the house, Vigirsha Bali, and he divorced her in the attic. Al Tigrasha Al Biamin Vigirsha, so divorce her on the right, divorce her on the left. Kuli Alma basically deviated from the standard directions of the get, and so therefore it's possible under certain conditions that if he messed up the way he received the deposit, that it's going to be problematic and the get won't be acceptable. The Gemara explains what's going on. So the Gemara says that this is what Reish Lakish must have meant. Everybody's at the position. Everybody would say that in a circumstance where she went out first and she gave him the deposit before he gave her the get, everybody would say that that's a valid get. Because, and we'll read the Rashi, even though he doesn't really want his deposit to be in somebody else's hands, her giving the deposit is not going to nullify the agency there of the get. So that's how Rashi reads it. He's still an agent because the get is not completely dependent upon this object, because it's possible that he could go and give the object, take the deposit, and he'll send the gift for somebody else. So therefore, if she gave the deposit first, it's not going to be considered like it's disqualifying the get. Ki pligi, where is there a dispute? Where is there a discussion, a dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish in a circumstance, Heicha de Amarle, where top of 29b, where he said to the agent, take from her this object, and then give her the get. But he went and he gave her the get, and then he took from her the object. He did it the opposite. So Rabbi Yochanan said that under these circumstances, we're going to say that if a person himself deviated, it's disqualified. And for sure, if he sent another agent to do it, for sure it's disqualified. It means say, if the agent the husband appointed did it the wrong way, it's disqualified. And for sure, if the agent appointed another agent. Reish Lakish says that the husband wouldn't care if that, and it's just the way he spoke, wasn't real. And it's kosher even if he appointed another agent to do it that way, if the agent himself appointed another agent. So that the first case was where the first Mishnah was where he brought it from Eretz Yisrael. So he doesn't need to say b'fanei nechta, the agent doesn't need to say it. But now, says our Mishnah, and maybe get me Medina Sayam. Somebody brings the get from outside of Israel. The Chala, and this person brings the get from outside of Israel, got sick. O says Shliach Bezdin, then he should make another agent in front of a court, and the court will then appoint another agent. And he shall say in front of the court, the first agent will say, he'll say it was signed and sealed in front of me. It was written and signed in front of me. And then the final agent doesn't need to say it. All he needs to say is, I'm an agent of the court. So so the Rabbanan said to Avimi, the son of Rabbi Avo, so he said, "By me name Rabbi Avo." They said, "Go ask." They said to Avimi, "Go ask your father, please, the following question: Shliach to shliach masvi shliach. Oh, wow. Can the agent of the agent then appoint another agent? Can we get a third agent or not?" So Amar Lahu, so Rabbi Avo said, "Listen, before I take the question." Avimi said, before I take the question to my father, let me try and correct it. Like sometimes you ask somebody who's married to a doctor a question, and the guy thinks he's the doctor. He starts answering it. So so Avimi says, I'm going to start answering this question. So what does he say? He said, he says, don't even bother asking this question. Mi de Kitani, ein ashliach acharon. And the fact that the Mishnah said, listen, the final agent does not need to say, this proves that there was another agent in there. Because acharon, so that means that there was another agent in there. So says Avimi, El Kiti Bayochu, the question you should be asking, Rabbi Avo, my father, is when the second agent appoints a third agent, does he have to do it in the court or not? So these Rabbanan said to Rabbi Avimi, that's not a question for us. From the fact that he says, I don't need to say Fananachtam because I'm an agent of the court, this proves that it has to be done in the court. So therefore, that question wasn't a problem to us. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says like this. That the Rabbanan said to Avimi, the son of Rabbi Avo, go ask your father the following question. Shliach the shliach, the agent of the agent, so the third agent, does he need to be appointed to the court? Does he need to be appointed as an agent in the court or not? They said, why are you asking if he has to be appointed an agent in the court? We have a bigger question. Can he even be appointed an agent in general? So the Rabbanan responded, no, we know he could appoint an agent in general. Because it says that the final agent does not need to say this proves Mikal the shliach masvi shliach. This proves that an agent can appoint another shliach. So the question we have is, the only question is, does he need to do it in front of the court or not? So Avimi responds, well, that's also not a question. He says, I'm an agent of the court. So that itself is not a question either. So Rabbah says, he says, in the land of Israel, one agent can point another agent, point another agent, point another agent. And it's not going to be a problem. And Rashi clarifies, and you don't need to do it in front of the court, unlike if they bring it from outside of Israel. What's the reason? Because since you don't need to say b'fanei nachtam, so too you don't need to say shliach bezdin on you. That's how Rashi explains it. Amar Rav Ashi says, let's say the first agent who then appointed a second agent, then appointed a third agent. Let's say the first agent dies in Mace. If the first agent dies, Mace Rishon, if the first agent dies, Boker Tov. So it says Rav Ashi, if the first agent dies, Batlu, cool, and then all of them are going to be considered nullified. Once the first agent dies, they're all nullified. So Amar Rav Ashi, once the first agent dies, then all the agents are canceled. So it says Rav Ashi, so Rav Ashi's son. This is already after the conclusion of the Gemara. Says Rav Ashi's son, this statement that my father made that once the first agent dies, they're all canceled. That he said the Katnusi. That he said while he was still a baby. I mean, he said not while he was still a baby, while he was still in his youth. The Katnusi. Why? If the husband had died, If the husband had died, then we would say midei mishasha isbu. That will make sense that the whole agency is canceled. Because kul mikoach man kasu. Because who does everybody come from? Whose power? Whose strength? Mikoach the bal kasu. They're coming from the husband. So isa about is nulakul that once the husband's there, then they're all that once the as long as the husband's there, all the agents could be there. But leisa about once the husband's no longer there, leisa nulakul, then all of them lose their power. Ahu Gavra, there was a certain man, the Shadar Agito at Beisau, he sent to get to his wife. Amar Shliach. So the agent said, there was once an agent that sent to get to his wife. So the agent said, Lo Yadanala. The agent said, I don't know who your wife is. I don't know how to give it to her. So the husband said, Amrei Zilya Hava La'aba Barmenyumi. So the agent said, so the husband said, give it to Abba Barmenyumi. The Ilu Yadala. He knows who she is. Velezo Velisva, and he'll go and give it to her. So Asabo Ashkacho Abba Barmenyumi. So the agent came and he couldn't find Abba Barmenyumi. Ashkacho Rabbi Avo. The agent found Rabbi Avo, Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. And he found those three rabbis. V'yaseh Rav Safra Gabayim. Rav Safra was sitting with them. Amruay, so they said to him, Mesor Milech Kamedi Dan. They said, appoint us to be tell us what to do. The Chiyesi Abba Bar Menyumi, because when Abba Bar Menyumi comes, Nitbein away, V'lezo, V'litban away. So that we'll appoint him, and then he'll go and appoint her. So Amru Rav Safra. So Rav Safra said, you can't do that. This is a technical requirement. In order for the agent to be able to appoint another agent to be a get, he has to be specifically an agent that was appointed for gerushin, and not just an agent that was appointed for in general, not just a general agent. So Rav Safra said this to the rabbis. They became embarrassed. So Amar Rava. So Rava said, hold on 1 second. Rava said, Kapchinu Rav Safra. So Rava said, Rav Safra embarrassed these three rabbis who are smuche, who are ordained. Rav Ashi says, he hasn't really embarrassed them. Did he say Abba Bar Menyumi has to be the one to give it to her and not you? He was basically giving him advice. He wasn't limiting him specifically to Abba Bar Menyumi. Or alternative version of the story is Ika da Amri. Alternative version of the story is Amarava Kapchinu Rav Safra. The alternative version is that Rava said Kapchinu Rav Safra Tasu Rabbanis Simuche B'Tausa. That he says that Rava said Rav Safra mistakenly corrected these three rabbis. And Amar Avashi Mai Tausa. What's the mistake? Maika Amarle. What did he say to him? He said Abba Bar Menyumi V'lo At. He said to him, Abba Bar Menyumi has to do it and not you. And so therefore, he said, Micah Amroy, Abba Bar Menyumi V'lo At. Meaning to say, the husband said to the agent, Abba Bar Menyumi has to do it and not you, because you don't recognize her. And so therefore, you're only an agent to give the get to Abba Bar Menyumi. And Rav Safra was correct. So Rav Safra was correct that this was just a regular agent and not an agent for divorce, and he wasn't able to have. They weren't able to change him. There was an agent. There was an agent who sent the get to his wife. So he says to his wife, says to the agent, Lo tiyasvei nihila atlas and yom. He says, don't give it to her. Don't give her the get until 30 days. In this bego atlas and yom, within those 30 days, there was an ones. Something happened, and he knew he wasn't going to be able to give it the get. Also, kame de Rava. So then he came in front of Rava, and Amar Rava. Rava said, Chala, what's the reason why if he got sick, he could appoint another agent? Because we're saying that he has extenuating circumstances. Here also it's extenuating circumstances, he could appoint another person. So he says, appoint us, and after 30 days, we'll appoint an agent. And the agent will give it to her. So Rabbanan said to Rava, but this is an agent who was not appointed to divorce. Because within those 30 days, he couldn't divorce her. So he says, no, since after those 30 days, he could divorce her. It's like an agent that was eventually going to be able to do divorce. Gemara says, but we have another concern. If you give a get, and if you ask for a get to be given, and before the get is given, you have an appeasement, then the whole get is disqualified. So why don't we have to be concerned about that? Milo Tanat, don't we learn in the Mishnah in the Darim and also later on in Gittin, Me'achshav and Morbasi Mikama Yud Beis Chodesh. A man says, you're divorced from right now if I don't come in the next 12 months. And he dies in those 12 months. I raise that get. We say it's a valid get. And we asked about that. Why don't we have to be concerned about an appeasement that they made up and the get was canceled? She said, in that case, for sure, there was no appeasement. So why don't we say here that there might have been appeasement? She didn't say that. So but in the end, so he was embarrassed. But in the end, it came out that we didn't even have to worry about them having an appeasement because they never had seclusion, because it was a milsa that she was only betrothed, she wasn't fully married. You needed a gap, but you don't have to worry about yichud under those circumstances. So Amar Rava and Amar ben Asua, if we say we're worried about an appeasement by a full marriage because they're used to each other, Rashi says shechaviva love u'mechazer l'paisa. He loves her more because they're fully married and he's going to try and appease her. If we'll say that by an arusa, Amar ben Asua, we say that by an arusa, and Amar Rava, and Rava says this law, I'll tell you where we do have a question. This is the question on top of when you go to the court, you say, I want you to appoint this other person an agent. Does that have to be in front of him, or in front of the first agent, or even not in front of the first agent? So then they respond, and they say, no, you can appoint the agent whether in front of him or not in front of him. And you can point the third. The court doesn't need the first agent there in order to appoint the second agent. Just want to say something before we stop for the day. That is this